We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chav Daled. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Vayelech. It's a Rashi Sicha, the Rashi that talks about when they should make the Shnas Hakil, that it's after the 7 years. The Rebbe is going to explain details, the Rashi of Miketz Sheva Shon B'Moed Shnas HaShemitah. The Rebbe explains that Rashi is really concerned over here. After asking all the questions, the Rebbe explains that Rashi is really concerned over here why we do the Shnas Hakel, which is an inspiration or the gathering itself that takes place on the Sukkot when the king, we read from the Parshias and we inspire everybody. Why is it taking place after Shemitah? It seems like the right time would be in the time of Shemitah when people are able to take the time off. They're not working in the field, so that should be the time. And Adrabah, so Rashi explains that this is a Shona Shminis, it's a hemshech to this time, as the Rebbe will explain in the details, in the Rebbe's explanation. The Rebbe will also bring down in the Yonim Ufloim in the Parsha. The question is whether, in order to do the mitzvah of Hakel min HaTorah, it has to be Shemitah. You have to observe the Shemitah. What if there is no Shemitah, but it's still the 8th year, like during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash? But let's go step by step. Vayelech. Aleph. In the tzivui of mitzvahs Hakel, in the Haschola, with the command for the mitzvah to gather the people, which so it begins with is the haskola. So what does it begin with? So the pasuk says, "Miketz sheva shonim," in the end of 7 years, b'moyed shnas hashmita, in the festival, in the year of Shemitah, when b'chag HaSukkos, in the festival of Sukkos. Seems like it says it's after 7 years on the Moyed, but it says Shnasa Shemitah b'Chag HaSukkos, during the time of the Shnasa Mitu Chag HaSukkos. So is Rashi mighty from Posik the Verter. So Rashi quotes from the verse, the words, Miketz Sheva Shonim, und is Mefarish. What does it mean at the end of 7 years? Rashi explains that this is Bishono Rishono Shel Shemitah. It's the first year of the Shemitah of the 7-year cycle, which is essentially Shishona Hashminis. It's not the 7th year, but it's actually the 8th year. So if it's the 8th year, Frekt Rashi, Beloma Koida Oiso Shnasa Shemitah. So why does the pasuk refer to it as the year of Shemitah? We're talking about the Shemitah year is the 7th year. This is already after Shemitah. So why does as Rashi said before, that this is Shona Shminis, is the 8th year. So why does the pasuk refer to it B'moyed Shnasa Shemitah? Lama Koreiso Shnasa Shemitah. Why is it called the year of Shemitah? And Rashi answers, Sha'adayin Shvi'is Noiheges Bo. It's still a little bit of a Shemitah. It's still a year of Shemitah. Why? Because the 7th laws of the 7th year of the Shemitah that we just finished still apply to it in the 8th year. B'kotzir shel Shvi'is hayotze lemoitzoi Shvi'is. So when you cut the shvi'is, that which has grown on the 7th year, and it comes out to after shvi'is, that cut is still applies the laws of Shvis to those growing things that grew in the next year from the Shvis that you cut later on. So it's called Shnasa Shemitah because there is the laws of Shvis, the laws of Shemitah Neheges. That's what Rashi says over here. So what is Rashi coming to tell us over here? V'melerin bepashtus, as you learn it simply, is the shaila was Rashi kumt far entfern. What is the question that Rashi is coming to answer? Loshin hakosuv is miketz sheva shonim. The pasuk's language is at the end of 7 years. The end of the 7th year would be the 7th year of Shemitah. That would be the 7th, not the 8th year, but the 7th year. Miketz Sheva Shonim, der Soif von the Zibun Yor, the end of the 7 years. From them Zibetun Yor, meaning of the 7th year at the end. Unazoi is Oich, move on. Good. What's going on?
Is your phone? Oh, okay. No, I'm just walking by. I thought I'd say hi.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
Good.
I carry around you. And your
Fine.
regimen.
Fine.
Did you guys walk today?
Not yet. Waiting after the doctor.
Okay. See you later.
Say it. And this would also be learned out from the language of the Pasik. The Pasik says, in Zeich von Loshen, b'moyed shnasa Shemitah, in the time of the year of Shemitah, which would be the 7th year. Ados is the year for Shemitah. So that would mean in the year of Shemitah. But the Noch is the Pasik Messiah, but then the Torah concludes the Chag HaSukkos. So how do we explain this? Chag was is not in Seif fun Zibeten Yor. Sukkot is not in the end of the 7th year. So the Torah keeps on saying it's on the 7th year. It says Miketz Sheva Shonim in the end of the 7 years. It says B'moyed Shnasa Shemitah in the time of the year of Shemitah. And then it says Chag HaSukkos, which is not in the 7th year. So how do we reconcile it? Is Rashi mefadish? Therefore, Rashi explains. As miketz sheva shonim do, what does it mean at the end of 7 years here? Meant it doesn't mean at the end of the 7th years, but it means after the 7th, all the 7 years completed. And this means, therefore, shono rishoino shel shemitah sheishono shminis. It's the first year of the next shemitah of the shemitah, which is essentially the 8th year. Following the 7 years, it's the 8th year, which is the first year of the next Shemitah. Das heißt, as Miketz meant Take Soif. Miketz Take means at the end. Vila Rashi Taich Bereish Parshas Miketz, as Rashi already translated in the beginning of the portion of Miketz, Kol Loshen Ketz, anytime when it says Ketz is Soif, it's the end. Oberes main, but Kates means nochun soif. It means Mikates means after the end. Nor dem bis endigen sich die Zayin shonim, after the 7 years completed. Shehi shono shminis, which is the 8th year. So after Mikates, meaning not at the end, but after the end of 7 years, and then, which is really Shono Shminis. So what does it mean? But the pasuk that continues, it says, B'moyed shnasa Shemitah. It's on the time of Shemitah, the year of Shemitah. is mashma as das meint in Shnasa Shemitah, so it appears that it means that it's within the year of Shemitah on the 7th year. Is Rashi Mamshech? That's where Rashi continues. Velomo koira oiso Shnasa Shemitah. So why does he call it the year of Shemitah? Und verantwortet Rashi's answers is Shadayin Shvi is Naheges Bochulu, because Shvi is the 7 laws of this 7th year still apply to it, and that's why we call it the Shemitah year. That's the way we explain simply what it looks like in the Rashi. But the Rebbe says if the whole reason that changes Rashi's pshat is because how does Chag HaSukkos fit in if we're talking about at the end of Shemitah? Rashi should have quoted from the Pasuk B'Chag HaSukkos. Lifizei is aber nit verstandig, but according to this, it's not understood. Aleph. Rashi should have hot gedarft. He should have mighty sein euch die Wörter b'Chag HaSukkos. Also the words b'Chag HaSukkos. Oder al kol ponim zei merame sein mit v'goymer, or at least he should have said, etc. when he quotes the Pasuk. Warum das ist doch ma'öder de Schwerigkeit in Pasuk. That is the one that brings about, this raises the difficulty in the verses, because how does it come to the Chag HaSukkos if it's at the end of Shnas HaShemitah and it's the year of Shemitah? Base. The Rebbe says further, Eib Rashi kommt mechadish sein, as Mikates Sheva Shonim, meint don noch dem this end sich the Sheva Shonim. What Rashi is trying to tell us that at the end means after the complete of 7 years. Noch dem bis Ende sich die Sheva Shonim. Nicht bewollt gelernt the Pashtus. Not as you would have learned simply. As das meint besoif Shnasa Sheva, it means at the end of the 7th year. But here we're trying to say it means at the end of at the end of the 7th year, after the 7th year, then he should have just said Shehi Shono Shminis. That's the 8th year. That Mikates is the 8th year. Parvos darfer magdim zayin b'shono rishona shel Shemitah. So why did I actually first say this is the first year of Shemitah? Should have just said the 8th year, so that it means the year after. That has no connection to explain what mikates, that it means after the 7 years have passed. Not at the end of the 7th year, but after. But the fact that it's the first year of Shemitah, this is not important here. That seems like it doesn't add to understanding the pasuk that this is the first year of the Shemitah. We find the Mishnah Gemara. As men ruf dem Zman von Hakel Bashmini, the time of Hakel is called the 8th. Bashminis. It's the 8th. As wird aber nicht gesagt of them, they don't say about this year, Ados is Shono Rishoina Shel Shemitah, it's the first year of the Shemitah. What is this, the point of the Shono Rishoina Shel Shemitah? And we'll see, the Rebbe will learn the whole idea is that it's a new year of Shemitah. That's the point why the inspiration needs to be said then, as we'll see later on, the Rebbe's interpretation. So basically, the Rebbe wants to know if Rashi is bothered by Chag HaSukkos, and so Chag HaSukkos is not at the end of the 7th year, and it's not in the year of Shemitah. Rashi should have quoted that from the Pasuk. And Rashi also would not need to say that this is the first year of Shemitah. You just say this is the 8th year. That means Mikates, after 7 comes the 8th. So it means that there's something else in the Rashi. And the Rebbe is going to try to answer a little bit, but he's not going to accept the answer. L'choire wollt man gekannt verantworten na kolponim the zweite Shaila now. Seemingly we could answer at least the second question, why Rashi has to say the Shana Rishona Shel Shemitah. As Rashi kumdo mechade sein an ander pirush, that maybe Rashi is actually coming to tell us, not like we learned before, but he's coming to tell us a different interpretation. Sai in mikates, that mikates means differently. Sai in Sheva Shonim, and also in 7 years, to translate it differently. Ubederach memela, euch shoyle noch a pirush was man gekent lernen in Posuk. And this way, Rashi is negating an additional interpretation of the Pasuk. We're going to say what Rashi is saying over here is different than we just said. Rashi is saying Mikates Sheva Shonim means different. And this doesn't, therefore, and so you don't say another pshat. Kosalko daitoch zu sagen, because one might think, and Rashi is coming to negate, so now we're trying to say how this other possible interpretation of Rashi would work, that what Rashi is coming to tell us that you should not make a mistake and say, because there would be a thought to say, that Mikates Pirushoi Soif, that Mikates means end, und das meint dem ganzen 7. Jahr, and this means the end of the entire 7th year, welcher is der Mikates from der Tekufa von Sheva Shonim. That is the end of the whole period, the 7-year period. Not the 7th year, but it means the entire 7th year, not the end within the 7th year, beginning, end, middle of the 7th year, but the end of the 7th year, the 7-year period, when the entire 7-year period of cycle of the Shemitah, the season of the Sheva Shonim, as zum Soif von 7 Jahr Tekufa, that in the end of the period of the 7-year, Hainu der ganze 7. Jahr, which means the entire, that concludes the period of the 7 years is concluded by the entire 7th year. Was is Moyed Shnas HaShemitah, which is the time, that is the time of the year of Shemitah, in dem Zman von Chag HaSukkos von 7. Jahr. So that would mean in the year of the Shnas HaShemitah of this 7th year should be Hakil. So basically we will make Hakil not on the 8th year, but we'll make Hakil on the 7th year. One can translate that. So if Mikates means this the end of the 7th year, then you can't say it in Sukkot. Sukkot is the beginning of the 7th year. But Mikates doesn't mean at the end of the 7th year, but at the end of the year 7, which concludes the Shnas, the year of Shemitah. At that time, at the 7th year, there should be Hakil. Hakil should be taking place on the 7th year of the Shemitah cycle. Again, so instead of learning Mikates in the end of the 7th year, towards the end of the year, it would mean in the end of when the 7th year, that completes the 7th cycle, the 7-year cycle, the Shemitah, then you make Hakil. And that is what Rashi is coming to reject. is Rashi shoylu dosu mefadesh. So Rashi rejects this and explains. As mikate sheva shonim do is a yotzim and a klal. So Rashi says that in the end here, sheva shonim is the exception. Do meint es nit soif. Here it doesn't mean at the end. Mikates would mean the end. No, it means in the beginning. Not aschola. Mikates means in the beginning when it starts the new cycle of the 7 years. Al derech megifind kama meforsha atoyre beparshas mikates bepirush mikates. In the meaning, what it says by mikates shnosayim yom, it means in the beginning of the next year. Shono rishoino shel shmita. This means mikates means the first year of shmita, not the last year, the first year. They're Anfang von 7 Jahr Habois, the beginning of the following years. So, if we say that this is what Rashi means, Lifizei is aber nicht verstandig liidoch. So we don't understand. In the other hand, was Rashi is moisif sheishona shminis. Why does he have to say it's the 8th year? It's not the 8th year. It's the beginning. Mikates means in the beginning of the new side of the Shemitah. Sie is a hemshech von der Friedrich Shemitah. Rashi says it's the 8th year, that it's a continuation of the previous Shemitah, but it's not a hemshech. We're talking about Mikates means in the beginning of the Shemitah. V'oid v'iker. But the main thing the Rebbe says, in addition, Rashi would say something that Mikates is different over here, that it means the beginning. And also the Lashon of Rashi, v'oid v'iker, oid Rashi kum b'chadish zayin, in the Werter Mikates Sheva Shonim. If Rashi is coming to come up with this idea that the words Mikates Sheva Shonim doesn't mean at the end of 7 years, but it means the beginning of 7 years, as is anders v'pirushe b'chol mokum, that this is different than his commentary elsewhere and every other place. So Rashi should have said it, Aleph, first of all, Beloshen Chidush, that it's a novelty, as is nit with a klavos aralein zokt. It does not meet the rule that Rashi himself says, Koloshin Kates Soifu. Whenever it says Kates, it means the end. Bring a right and then Puri Pirush, and then bring a proof for this commentary that it means the beginning. Rashi doesn't say that this is different. Base number 2, as a gedacht stehen als types from the Werter, this should have been written that this is the translation of the words. Mikate Sheva Shoni means Shono Rishono Shel Shmita. This meaning, Ket Sheva Shoni means the first year of Shmita. But it doesn't say so in the Rashi. Rashi writes it from Loshen Rashi Bashono Rishono Shel Shmita. In the first year of Shemitah is mashma as niter kommt abteichen dem Wort Mikates. He's not coming to translate what the word Mikates Sheva Shonim nor zogon mefared zayin in welchos man das is, but he's coming and detailing in which time it's taking place. That's not the taich of Mikates that in the beginning, but it means Bashona Rishono Shel Shmita Sheishono Shminis. On the first year of Shemitah, which is the 8th year, that is when it takes place, but not that is the translation Mikates. I guess just the word Mikates, Kates means from the end. But the end could be the end of, or also the beginning is also one end. That's why the possibility of Mikates could mean the beginning, because that's an end. That's the beginning end. But if Rashi really had in mind to change that, so first of all, Rashi should have written it more clearly that this is not the regular taich, and also he should have translated that Mikates Sheva Shonim means Shona Rishona, not Bashona, which means he's just telling you when it's taking place. This is a general question the Rebbe is saying. The pasuk identifies here by saying it's a Shnasa Shemitah because, as Rashi says, because you have back to the Rashi's pshat, that the reason why it's B'Shon Hashmini is, why you call it Shnasa Shemitah, is because there's some laws that apply. Why do we have to bring in that halacha over here that the laws of Shvius apply to the beginning? This is already something we know from before. Why say it over here? Also, we have to understand in general. Why is it important to know that it's the time of Shnas HaShemitah? Because you shall Shviz, that you still have the laws of Shviz apply in that thing that was cut from this Shviz that has gone out to Motzoi Shviz. Why is that? Why does the pasuk connect that? Then Isur Bakotzi Shal Shviz Hayetzel Motzoi Shviz. What do we know the prohibition that the growing things of Shviz that went into after Shviz, that there is an Isur, there is a prohibition of Shviz on them. At least according to one opinion, we know it from Frier Bepirush Rashi. Earlier in Rashi, Rashi brings down one opinion that what does that mean? That it means that what grows from Shviz that goes into after Shviz. Either way, whether you know it or not, it doesn't seem like it has a connection to the Tzir of Hakel to tell us the laws of Shviz. As damult seinen noch neue kama dinim for Shviz, that at that point you still have several dinim of Shviz that apply there. So why does the pasuk connect this whole thing with the law of Shviz that apply to the eighth day? So the Rebbe explained over here in the previous sif, that we cannot say that Rashi is coming to be mechadesh that Miketz Sheva Shonim means in the beginning of 7 years. That doesn't fit, the Rebbe said. And number two, the Rebbe brought out a general question. The way we're learning now that Miketz means at the end in the 8th year in the Pashtus, why does the Torah call it Shnas HaShemitah? Because of the laws of Shemitah that would apply in the 8th year. What does that got to do with the law, with the din of Hakil now that we're coming to teach us over here? Gimel. So the Rebbe explains the Biur Bazeh. The explanation of this. Rashi darf nicht mefarish sein dem Teich von Miketz. Rashi does not need to explain what Miketz means, but L'roche mefarish given kinal, because I said before, he already explained as kol loshen Ketz soifu, every time when it says Ketz, it means the end. Meile is moving, and therefore it's understood as bechol mokim is pirushei vidorten by vahi miketz. It's always the same as over there, vahi miketz. So what does it mean over there, miketz? As doich is the pirush la'achar the sheva shonim. It was after miketz. What is over there? Vahi miketz shnasayim yomim. Over there it means after 2 years passed. That's obvious. That's not something a chiddush that it means after the 7 years, because that's what it means over there too. But when Rashi, so therefore it's not that the Rebbe learned lechatchila that you shouldn't say miketz in the end of the 7th year and there's no sukkahs at the end of the 7th year. No, to begin with, that's not even the issue. That miketz means after, that comes after, just like over there. Here it means after the 7th year, after the 7 years. But Rashi kumt aber mevayer sein da shaila klolis in dem zman for mitzvahs hakil. Rashi is coming to explain a general question about the time of the mitzvahs hakil. The Rebbe will explain certain mitzvahs have a rationale. We could say logically, Rashi wants to explain to you something about the mitzvahs that are here. Now, The Rebbe says that even though it's not directly this pasuk, but before, when we start a new subject matter, Rashi will sometimes explain the general idea that follows. Ukemedubar kama pa'amim. I've spoken many times. As bekomo mekoimes verantwort Rashi ad inyan kloli in their parsha gleich mit chilosein, that in many places Rashi will address and answer a general matter in the parsha right in the beginning, just giving you a general answer to an issue. Although the question only arises when we read the later on psukim, Rashi will address it over here. Bald as thus is the psukim from their parsha. These are the verses of this portion. He can say it over here. Und das is an inyan kloli, and this is a general idea. Negates all psukim. It is important to all the psukim. Is that das masbir taken betchilas inyan. Rashi will explain this immediately in the beginning of the subject. And the Rebbe says Rashi needs to explain things, not just say they are. That's the way the Torah wants them. Rashi wants to explain so that it makes sense, because we see certain mitzvahs are presented in a way that they should be logical. This you should figure it should fit. Ubahagdim also in the simple way to learn the Chumash, Zetman you see as in mitzvahs ha-Torah seinen Faran mitzvahs, that in the Torah commandments there are mitzvahs was matam that have a reasoning, und es seinen doch chukim, and there are statutes was nitkin tam, they don't have a reason. Zumisha the mitzvahs was matam, amongst the mitzvahs that have a reason. See, Torah is mefarish their tams, whether the Torah articulates the reason, or the tam is moving ma'atzmek. Sometimes we know the reason on its own. There is also seine Faran mitzvahs, so on some mitzvahs, was euch zeire protim hab matam. Even the details have a reasoning. Und mitzvahs, but on the other hand, was zeire protim hab maderach habshat nitkin tam. Or some mitzvahs that, even though we have a general understanding of the mitzvah, but the details, according to the simple meaning, don't have a reason why. But here, the Torah seems to give you a very specific reasoning and rationalization, and therefore we need to explain the reasoning over here. The mitzvah's hakel is mefurish bepasuk der tamu mekuven mitzvah. By the mitzvah of hakel, it's articulated in the verse the reason and the intent of the mitzvah. It says Laman Yishmu, Laman Yilmadu, V'yoras Hashem Elikim Gomer. So that they listen, so that they learn, and they fear God, your God, etc. So basically, it says why we're gathering the people. We're gathering them for them to listen to the king, and for them to learn, so that they fear Hashem. And we also understand the details of this mitzvah, where it takes place, when it takes place. It's also logically understood. Not even the pasuk doesn't have to specify, but that's self-understood. It says, "Bevoy kol Yisrael lireis es pnei Hashem elikim b'mokim asher yivchar." When all of the Yidden come to see Hashem, the face of Hashem in the place that He chooses, that's the time. And that's logical. Why? Because Damut is gringer. At that point, it's easier. Makil zayin alle Yidden to gather all Yidden. And also the place that He's chosen is mer masim of poilin. It is more fitting to impact Laman Yishmu, Laman Yilmadu, V'yiru Gomer, so that they listen and learn, and they will fear Hashem. Based on this, we need an explanation. Since it's so logical and it makes so much sense, we need to explain something here. Something is bothersome here. Because the Torah zok as there's man hamasim is miketz sheva shonim. The Torah said the fitting time is after the 7 years Zum Eurer sein auf Ton Azach, in order to encourage and to arouse to do something. Ubefrat Eviras Hashem, especially to fear Hashem. But this is the mukuvon in mitzvahs hakel, which is the intent of the mitzvah of hakel, to bring about Yiras Hashem. Darf es nicht sein the siyum von Tekufa. That should not be in the end of a period, not in the Raschola von Tekufa. In the beginning, you're trying to encourage people to fear Hashem so that the future. Why are we doing it at the end? At the end of a period. Is Rashi mefarish as enochinami? So that's what Rashi explains. Yes, this is the beginning. Das main taka b'shon rishoyna shel shmita. It's the beginning of the period. It's the first year. That's when it's taking place. So why does the pasuk said at the end? Why are we emphasizing that it's the end? According to this, not understood. Prabhu state in pasuk mikates sheva shonim v'dos is madgish. Why does the pasuk say at the end, after 7 years, vodos is madgish? That emphasizes about the end of a period. Ados kumt als soif v'hemshech von the sheva shonim becomes as an end and a continuation of the 7 year. Zokt Rashi, so Rashi says, Shi shono shminis. It's taka the first year, but it's also the 8th year. That here it's important. Also the matter was the shona shminis, it's the 8th year. Der yor was kumt noch hashona shviz welche is ashnas shmita. It's a year that comes after the 7th year, which is a year of shmita, and this is the 8th year. That's also important. It follows, as the Rebbe explained in Ois Daled, it follows the 7 years of when they had time to devote themselves to it, and then following that, they can take along that inspiration to begin the new year, the new cycle. Daled, that's Borabazeh. Bishnas Hashmita, and the year of Shemitah, when Shabbos, and Gia La'oretz, a rest of rest should be to the land. Don't sow your field. Don't prune your orchard. Those droppings of what you cut, don't those growings, the things that grow by themselves, don't cut. Don't cut down all the beauty of the grapes. Basically, not to do work in the field. Is verstandig euch im Pshute shel Mikra. So one can understand, even in the simple learning of the verse, in the literal level, as demult sein dik poni von avodas ha'adama, that at that point when you are free from servicing or working with the land, but das ist gewesen der Iker von their Beschäftigungen. That was their main occupation. The people used to work the land. Haben in mer didn't have more ubiker, and mainly sich abgegeben mit limud Torah. They had more time, and mainly they devoted themselves to the study of Torah. Was hat gebracht zu Yiras Hashem u'shmiras hamitzvos, which brought about the fear of Hashem and keeping of the mitzvahs. So based on this is move on their kesher. So we should mitzvahs hakel, was is b'shon rishoyna shel shmita. The connection between the mitzvah of Hakel, which is on the first year of Shemitah, and Shnas HaShemitah, and the year of Shemitah, which is Shalif Neizah, that precedes this, the 7th year. And that's why it's the 8th year. When one needs to start the 6 years of sowing the ground, and the 6 years to prune the vineyard, in the ersten Jahr from Shemitah, and the first year of Shemitah, darf man haben a spezielles Säureres. You need a special arousal, a special encouragement, that should impact the weitere 6 year on the following 6 years. As euch demel, that also in the following 6 years soll sein, V'yoru es Hashem elikecha v'shomru lasis is called divrei haTorah zois, so that they should fear God and keep to do the words of this Torah. You need, before you getting involved back into the grinder, so to speak, going back into the 6 years, you need a special encouragement. Und das peilt man, and how do you impact this durch der Monen sich auf der Shnas HaShmita? By reminding yourself the year of Shemitah. Wenn man hat sich abgegeben in Limud HaTorah Chulin, in which we devoted to the study of Torah. Und sich angesappt mit Yiras Hashem, and we satisfied ourselves, we sucked up the fear of Hashem. The Toich of Mitzvah's Hakel is, what is the idea, the meaning, the contents? What is Hakel? Hakel is to fortsetzen, to continue, und starken and to strengthen these Eures from them Shemitah year, that awakening, that arousal of the Shemitah year, euch in the 6 nachkommende Jahr, also to the next following 6 years. When man is vernommen in Avodas Ha'adama, when one is occupied in working the land. Und das deitet on Rashi, this is what Rashi is pointing to mit sein anrufendem Jahr by calling this year Shishona Shminis, telling you it's the 8th year. Yes, it's the first year from the new cycle and we need this Garsh, but it comes as the 8th year, it follows it. The erster from the 6 year, the first year of the 6 following year, darf sein nicht bloße Haschala from the Nayer Shemitah. It should be not only a beginning of the new cycle of Shemitah, Shon Rishona Shel Shemitah, nor euch a hemshech from the frierdiken Jahr, but also a continuation from the previous year. Das is an 8er Jahr, was kommt noch der Shana Shvis. It's an 8th year that comes after the 7th year. So it's a follow-up to it. So the Rebbe explains, first of all, it's a Shana Rishona. And that means Mekates, it's after it finished the 7 years. But Rashi also says it's the 8th to tell you that we must continue the inspiration that we took by remembering that it's a Shona Shminis, the inspiration that we had in the 7th year, in the time that we had to devote to Torah and mitzvahs that brought Yiras Hashem, to bring it into the next cycle. And therefore, it's a Shona Shminis that helps you that in the new cycle, you will be able to continue with that inspiration while you're working the land, to continue with that inspiration. Hey, now we're going to answer, so why is it that we have the laws of Shvi'is, still some laws in the 8th year? That connects the Shvi'is even more to that new year, that we even have part of the inspiration, but we even have part of the laws over there. Hey, Apize, that when I verstehen dem Inyan, basically also understand the idea from Koira Oiso Shnas HaShemitah, that he calls it the Shnas HaShemitah Shadayin Shvi'is Naheges Bachulu, because the Shvi still applies over there. There is still a Shnas HaShemitah. Was is Kenal L'chayre Nit Muvan, which, like said before, it's not understood. For was there Posik in Parshas Hakel? Why does the Posik in Parshas Hakel, Darf Mediyazai, needs to let us know Shadayin Shvi'is Kulu, that it's still Shvi'is? What is that Nigeya? This is neat. So the Rebbe says, this is neat. Stam azaytiker siman efnyor. This is not just a outside sign. Oh, it's a year which telling you that's a year that it still applies the laws of Shemitah. That would not have a connection to the year of the mitzvah of Hakel, but rather to forsetzen these Eidurus from the Friedrich and Shemitah year in order to continue that awakening, that arousal of the previous Shemitah year. Is the Pasuk Madgish, the Pasuk emphasizes, as euch der 8er Jahr is Shnas HaShemitah, also the 8th year is the year of Shemitah. Weil adayin Shvi'is neheges bo, because Shvi'is still applies to it. Nit nor is in der Haschole von schon der Shoina Shel Shemitah. Not only that in the first year of the Shemitah, though there is Zikorin und there is Eures from the Friedigen Shemitah Yor. We have the remembering, we're just remembering, and the awakening from the previous Shemitah year. There's also something about Shemitah in actuality in them kotzir shel shvi sayotzel motzoi shvi. The thing that you're cutting in after shvi is from what grew on shvi is you actually have shmita b'meila noch freie Zeit of limud Torah. You still have some free time because there are certain things that grew in the shmita year, and you're still coming out now. But telling you this is Shemitah. Shemitah is still here in a certain extent. So now the Rebbe brings out from the Yonim Ufloim whether you actually need to have Shemitah and in order to have Hakil. And as the Rebbe will bring out from Rashi, Bo, min Yonim Ufloim al derech ha'alocha, from the wondrous things according to halacha, was meken aris nemen from the Pirush Rashi, which one can take out from this Rashi's commentary. And that was the mitzvah von Hakel is Mekates Sheva Shonim b'moyed Shnasa Shemitah. The fact that mitzvah Hakel is after the 7th year in the time of the year of Shemitah, which still has that Shemitah laws. As this is the Yor noch Shemitah, is the year of after Shemitah. Kaman Clarence, you can figure, you can think, question, Sidos is bloiza simen, whether it is merely a sign in welchen Yor medat mekayim sein mitzvahs hakel, on which year we need to do the mitzvah hakel. It's Bashminis, it comes on the 8th year. In the Yor noch Shemitah, it comes in the year after Shemitah. So just telling you when it is, 7 years, and then the 8th year. Or on the other hand, we can say maybe, see, it's totally in the kiyum for mitzvah Shemitah, it hinges, you have to fulfill the mitzvah Shemitah in order to have the mitzvah Hakel. The nafkamina derfun the poil, when would there be a practical nafkamina? Bisman ba'yishening. And nowadays, we don't have either. We don't have Shemitah, and we don't have Hakel, the literal Hakel. But the practical difference would be in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Loit the deyes as damult is mitzvah Shemitah given nor midrabanan, according to the opinions that say that the laws of Shemitah was only midrabanan. It depends on, because you don't have all the inhabitants by Yovel, whether Shemitah is connected with Yovel, do you need all the inhabitants, which we didn't have during the Bayis Sheni. So some say that also Shemitah was only midrabanan in Bayis Sheni. So, loit der erster svara. So according to the first idea, that is just a sign when it takes place, but it doesn't need to have Shemitah min haTorah. As his blois as simen ve'medarf mekayim zayin mitzvahs hakel. It's only a sign when the number year that you have to do the hakel is moving. It's understood. As ich demelt in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash is men given mechuyev b'mitzvahs hakel min haTorah. We were obligated in the mitzvah of hakel from the Torah. But unloy der zweiter svara, according to the second idea, which requires the actually mitzvah of Shemitah in order to do Hakel, since we didn't do according to those opinions Shemitah, there was no Hakel. Is mandamot given potter min haTorah, so then you were exempt from the Torah. But api hanal in asboras loshen Rashi, the way we explained Rashi's language, ubefrat siyum l'shoin, especially as we explained the end of Rashi's language. Why do we call it Shemitah? Because the Shemitah still applies it. So basically, it's a hemshech to Shemitah, and it's still applicable. It's a hemshech von dem Kiyum Mitzvah Shemitah B'Shnas HaShvius. It is a follow-up. It follows the observance of Shemitah in the 7th year, Kum Tuis. So then it turns out as Mitzvah's Hakel is Tolui in the Kiyum Mitzvah Shemitah Min HaTorah, in fulfilling the Shemitah of Min HaTorah. So you have to keep Shemitah. But the Rebbe now brings in the bracket that there's also another possibility. We can say we don't need it to be Shemitah Min HaTorah, even if it's a Shemitah Midrabanan, it can serve as a pre for the Hakel, and the Hakel will be Min HaTorah, and the Rebbe brings in other places with the Rakinyan and the Rabbanon helps for the Eraisa. Das is aber nicht muchrach. It's not absolute. You can also say, as if you're observing the mitzvah Shemitah, it doesn't matter, you're just fulfilling the mitzvah on the 7th year. Even it's only from the Rabbanon. Since practically you are resting, you're not working the land. Hastas legabe mitzvahs hakel min ha-Torah. So legabe mitzvahs hakel, it's a Torah hakel, even though that the Shemitah was midrabanan. Ashnasa Shemitah and haketnit. It's still coming from a year that he's not plowing, etc. He's not doing the work. And also then, in the time of Beis Hamikdash, they were mechuyev in the mitzvahs hakel min ha-Torah. Similar to you find. You say, well, it's midrabanan. How could this help for the Torah? No, as akinyim midrabanan helps to vinyarim in Torah, even though it's an acquisition, which the Rabbanan said, but it helps from the Torah. If the Rabbanan say that you can't work then, and the person doesn't work, that would impact that. Then the hakel that follows would be a regular hakel to fit that. And now the Rebbe is going to explain according to Pnimius Yonim. In Oz Zayin, the Rebbe will explain where do we find in the Hakel, in what the king was reading for the people, this continuation of the inspiration that we take from Shemitah. The Rebbe's whole idea was that we are basically continuing the inspiration that we took from not working and not pruning, and that the field and everything belongs to Hashem, and the field is resting, and the person is not working. But where do we see this in the Hakel, in the Parshas? And the Rebbe will explain how actually all the 3 different aspects, the resting of the ground, the resting, as we'll see later on in Oisches, Zayin. We need to understand in the inner matter of things. Der Teuchen von Shnas HaShemitah, what is the content, the idea of a year Shemitah? Welcher is mefoirish b'Torah shebiksav, which is articulated in the Torah shebiksav, is nicht das, was Eden wollen b'meshach dem Yor, that the Yidden will, during the year of Shemitah, them is ponui von avodas hadoma, in which you are free of working the land, sich vernehmen merer mit limud ha-Torah chulu. Over there, in the Torah doesn't say that you'll have more time for learning Torah. What does the Torah tell you? What is Shemitah? Nor Shabbos, and Yil Haaretz, that the land should rest. The field you shall not sow, and the vine you should not prune. Und das poilt euch in die später dicke shonim. And this impacts also in the later 6 years, when Tizra Sodecha and Tizmer Karmecha, that when you do sow your field, then you prune the orchard. While mit kiyum mitzvah Shemitah, because how does it impact later on? Because when you fulfill the mitzvah Shemitah, veis hayid, a Jew knows, bepoil, And he actually shows in actuality as ein davar meyuchad birshusay, that there is nothing really specific in his own domain. Raksha hakoil birshus adin hakoil. Everything belongs to the master of everything. Belongs to Hashem. It's not really his. That's why he's stopping to work and he's doing the mitzvah shmita. As the Eberster is the balabos, that Hashem is the one in charge of Zayin Soda on his field. Und auf alles, was ist da in Welt, and everything is in the world. As explained at length in the commentaries that explain the mitzvahs. Und and therefore, is ein Tizra und Tizmer in the Shei Shonim. So therefore, when he sows and when he prunes in the 6 years, it fits the way Hashem wants, which is the Ratzon from Balabais from the world. That is the will of the one who is in charge, who owns the world. And he follows his direction. Und wie bald as the Teure is madgish, as mitzvahs hakil, is b'moed shnasa shmita, but the Teure tells us that the mitzvah of hakil is on the time, in the period that is still shnasa shmita, okay, now. And as we said earlier, as Hakil is a Forsetzung, that Hakil is a continuation. From the Resoidus, from Shnasa Shmita, from that arousal from the year Shmita, Vidos kommt in Shona Shmini, as it comes to the 8th year, darf man sagen, then we have to say, as euch dies Eures von Shmita, that also this awakening, arousal of Shmita, that Hashem is the boss, and the Eberster and the field is, and he's in charge of everything. That is also Nimshech in the Shei Shonim, that continues in the 6 years durch the Seidrus of Hakel, through the arousal of Hakel. Darf man verstehen, so we need to understand, wo gefindt man in Hakel, where do we find in Hakel his Seidrus of them Inyan, on the arousal of this idea, on the idea of the Shemitah. And the Rebbe wants to say that in the psukim that we read, there's actually hinted for these inyonim, this idea. Der Shleimer Ados is verbunden with the Parshias B'Torah was the Melech Lein B'Hakel. This is connected to the portions of the Torah which the king reads during Hakel. With the Mishnah Rechen Ze Ois, the Girsas Rashi, as the Mishnah enumerates them as Rashi's version, Mitchila Eila Dvorim Ad Shema, from the beginning of Eila Dvorim till Shema, and then Ushma, Voyim Shemoya, Aser to Aser, so all the portions in Dvorim, Kischalel Aser, Brochas Uklolus, and Parshas HaMelech, Hasim Alay Melech. These are all the portions that we read, as the Rebbe will explain. Yes, so the beer was there. The explanation is Mitzvah Shemitah tells sich bechlolos in drei inyonim. The mitzvah Shemitah generally has 3 aspects: the person resting, the land resting, and the fruit that grow during the Shemitah year are hefker. Aleph, Shvisas Odom, der Isur of an Odom zu vernehmen sich mit Avodas Adama, the prohibition on the person to occupy himself with working the land. And therefore, the person needs to devote totally with study, canal, and not do any work in the field. Base, number 2, Shvisas Oretz, the resting of the land. B'shavsa ha'oretz, Shabbos laHashem. The land will rest as Shabbos for Hashem. V'bal the eretz is done Shabbos von Allah Avodas, since the land is resting of all services. As werd dem yor nit giton kein Avodas ha'adama. On this year there is no work done in the land. He says, Ba'eretz gufa an inyan von Shabbos laHashem. So then by the land itself, it becomes a matter that the land itself is resting for Hashem. So the land is resting. So you have the person resting and the land resting. And then Gimel, number 3, the Peiros was Baksanus B'Shnasa Shmita. The fruits that grow up during the year Shemitah year, so in Hefker Lakoil, they're free for everyone. Der Baal Habayis was so the Torah sei nicht halten als a Sach was belongt to him. The owner of the field cannot hold on to them as something that belongs to him. And those are the three manifestations of the Shemitah laws. The Mekuvan Kloli V'ikri from mitzvahs Shemitah is what is the general intent, and the main intent of the mitzvah of Shemitah is Kinal. It says before to beweisen, to show V'hakoil B'Rshus Odin Hakoil, that everything belongs in the one who master of everything. Is Yesh Loimar, so we can say as in Yeder from the Drei Yonim Hanal, that in each one of these three aspects of these three matters, Prat expresses a different detail in the Bailus von Obersten, in the ownership, in the belonging to Hashem, Kidl Kamon, as the Rebbe will explain later on. Oistes. That Inyan for Shvisas Odom, the fact that the person rests, is Madgish that emphasizes the Bailus Va'adnus from the Obersten von Odom, the ownership and the master, that the Eberster is the master over the human being. I have been created to serve my acquirer, serve Hashem. As a Yid vernemt sich mit Inyone ha'ilom, when a Yid occupies himself with worldly matter, is all to vergessen. So it's possible that at the time he may forget if tachlis briyose, the purpose of his creation. As that is an Eved Havaya, that he's a servant of Hashem. Und sein Rotzen und Avoida darf sein zu werden dovuk zum Obersten, and that what he really needs to want and his services to be connected to Hashem, but he may forget that. Oder Oberster noch jede 6 Jahre gegeben 1 Jahr, so after every 6 years, Hashem gave 1 year. When a Yid darf sich abscheiden von Yone Ha'olam, which a Yid must separate himself from worldly matters, und sich abgeben in Ganzem mit Avodah Ruchnis, and devote himself totally to the spiritual service. In welchen es is nicker begolui, in which you can openly tell sein Dvekas b'Hashem, his connection to Hashem. Und das gibt a Yidin koyach, and that year, and that showing that gives the Yid the power, as when es kommt noch, that later on when it comes, Sheishonim Tizra Sodecha, the 6 years that you sow your field, Goimer Zoller feel, he should feel, as Oich Di His Askus, that also this occupation in the physical, working the field, is an Inyan from Avodas Hashem. This too is serving Hashem, L'shamish es Koini, to serve my master, to serve Hashem. Ertutas l'shem shamayim, he does it for the sake of heaven, until more than just l'shem shamayim, but knowing Hashem in all of his ways. That is the emphasis when the person's resting. What is shvisas haaretz? The land resting is madgish. That emphasizes the bailus von Obersten. That emphasizes Hashem's ownership, Hashem is being in charge of them eretz, on the land. Koile ir teva, also the nature of the land. B'chuka teva b'chlal. In generally, the laws of nature. But the Pasuk zogt, as the Pasuk says, when you say, what do we eat on the 7th year? But we didn't sow and we did not gather our grain. So the Eibishter says, I will instruct my blessing to you on the 6th year. It will produce enough grain for 3 years. So you see that there's going to be a whole change in nature. According to the laws of nature, is the tzmicha and vuks from der tvua, the growth and the sprouting of the grain, tolui in them friedrich and akrin und sehen. They are hinged on the previously having plowed and sown. Beweis der Eibishter in Shnas HaShmita, the Eibishter shows us in the years of Shmita, those was the Erd macht wachsen tvua. Is that the fact that the earth makes grain grow and fruit is as loy bekoichav v'sguloso. It's not the power of the earth, and it's the special cherished, the special treasure of the earth.
The Eibishter makes it. Is as in that attitude that it's nature, then it would be hinged on plowing and sowing. It's Hashem that gives you the power to do this strength. When the Eibishter will, and when Hashem wants, the grain grows not according to the laws of nature. Bis as the zriya von ein yor, to the extent that the sowing of 1 year, shona shishis, of the 6th year, vert l'mayla mahatava, this is beyond nature, genug of dra yor. It's 3 years sufficient. V'osos es atvu l'sholish hashonim, that it makes the grain for 3 years. Und von dem nennt man die Hakore und Hergish. From that you take the recognition and the feeling, euch in the Shonim, that also in the 6 years, when you are plowing and sowing, as the tvua was waxed by him in Soda, that the grain that grows in your field is it's truly not because of the plowing and the sowing, nor mitzad birchas Hashem, but rather it's because of the blessing of Hashem. So the person actually gets to see that. So we have these two aspects: the land resting, which shows that the land and nature does not really apply, but it's Hashem that does it. And the person's resting shows that the person is always in service of Hashem, and that he is the one that gives you this success. And then you have the third aspect, Yud. The drittering Shmita was paid as Shviza and Hefker. That brings out, that expresses the idea that the Eibishter is the Balabais of Nichse Odom, that Hashem is in charge over the assets of the person. Them was the Eibishter bensteid mit Nechosim, even after Hashem blesses a Yid and gives them the assets, for bleiben sie in dem Eibishter's Bailus Rishus, they still remain under the ownerships and domain of Hashem. The Eibishter is the boss over there. You can think, hey Emes, while it is true, let it be true, as nor der Eibishter gibt the bracha, it's only Hashem that gives the blessing, and it gives the power as the tfuz of oxen that the grain should grow. And it's not that his plowing or sowing, or the special the earth's capability. But after the Eibishter is giving him the blessing, when the tfuz is ausgewachsen, the tfuz already grew, and he is by him and he owns it. The Eibishter gave these grain to his property. It's his. He owns it. While it's true that since you are created only to serve Hashem, when the river is clear, that's why it's clear as that also everything that a Jew owns needs to be utilized to serve Hashem by utilizing it for kedusha matter, or the kol masach l'shem shemayim, or all your actions shel l'shem shemayim kinal mentioned earlier. Ava became, but still is far da nord far an hergish. There's still room. You feel as the nechosim belonging to him, they still belong to him. You feel, but it is machlit. You are the one that makes the decision. It's yours, and you can decide, and you use them the way Hashem wants. Learn the Dritterinja, and therefore the third aspect for Shviz as a Yid hat nit kein eigenem Beilus, that a Yid does not have his own ownership of seine Nechosim and his own assets. And das drückt sich aus in them. This expresses itself. Was einmal in 7 Jahren, once in 7 years, sagt on Torah instructs as alle Pedus, all the fruit, welche seinen ausgewachsen bei ihm im Feld, they grew in his field. Seinen Hefker Lakol belonged are free, ownerless to everybody that wants. Those der Mont, this reminds, as euch in the Sheish Shonim, that even during the 6 years, when halten the Peders for sich, when he's allowed to hold the Peders for himself, he says, nicht weil sie gehören him, it's not because they belong to him. So Tom would say, was will to do what he wants. There's a zayin in them Eibishnos nechosim, but this is rather assets of Hashem, Melchazayin in im gegeben geworden, because they were given to him as a deposit. As soll sein dem Eibishnos Shliach, that he should be the agent of Hashem to durchführen mit zei das was der Eibishter will, so that he will accomplish with them that what Hashem wants. It's not his to do the way he decides to do, but rather they're his for him to go ahead and do that which Hashem wants with them. So that's this third reminder of the fruits being hefker to everybody, to show you that even what you already grew by you is still ownerless. Hashem owns it, and therefore you will end up giving it to the right people, doing the right things with it when you do have ownership, when the 6 years when things do belong to you. So all of these things have a separate reminder for the person, for the land, and for the fruit. And now the Rebbe will tie this into the parshas that we read, Yud Aleph. So based on this, we'll understand the shaykhis von mitzvahs hakel euch zu protzei mitzvahs shmita, the connection of the mitzvahs hakel to the details of the mitzvah shmita as we just articulated in the three mitzvahs. The teuchen von the drei yonim anal, the idea of these three aspects that mentioned. Shvisas Adam, the person resting. Shvisas Aretz, the land resting. Und das was paid Shviz and Hefker Lokol, and the fact that the fruits of Shviz are ownerless, they're Hefker for everybody. Was dricken ois the Bible shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they express Hashem's ownership on Adam, on the human being, on Eretz, on the land, Chukei HaTeva, on nature, und Nichsei Adam, and the assets of the person. Is der Chelek HaToichem von der Parshas v'ch malein b'hakel. That is the part of the content, those are the portions that we read in Hakel. Parshas Shema, V'hoyim Shemoya, Un Aser Ta'aser, Kischalo La'aser. Shema, V'hoyim Shemoya, Un Aser Ta'aser La'aser. In Parshas Shema, redt sich wegen der Avodah Ruchnis von Aiden. Portion Shema discusses the spiritual service of a Yid. Kabbalah's oil malchus shamayim, accepting the heavenly yoke. Limud HaTorah, the study of Torah. Kiyam mitzvahs, observance of mitzvahs. The portion talks about tefillin, mezuzah. But this is behesem zum ersten inyan anal in Shemitah. That is fits to the first aspect of Shemitah. Shvisas Adam, the person's resting. Kidei erzol kenen sein ponui. He should be free to abgeben sich mit inyanim ruchnim kanal, to devote himself to spiritual matters as above. In Parashat V'hoyim Shemoya, but in the second portion of V'hoyim Shemoya, Retzich Vidur Shemoya Tishmu Goimer, that through, if you listen, Osik says, he's going to sati mitarartzchem be'itoi, your rain will come in time, Osafta de Gonecha, you'll gather your grain, Goimer. And if God forbid, if you turn away from Hashem, it won't be, earth will not give, etc. Thus is Madgish, this emphasized, that the Eibishter is the Balabais of Chukei HaTeva, that the Eibishter is in charge on the laws of nature. And therefore is the Gashmish von Ayidin. And therefore the physicality of a Yidin, to gather your grain, up heinig. It depends not in Adam, not in the plowing and sowing of the person, nor in Shemaya Tishmu al Mitzvah. To listen to the Mitzvah Hashem. That's what it depends on. In Ois Folgen, the Meibishton's Rotzen to listen to Hashem's will. So that's the second part, fitting to the Shvisas Ha'oretz. When the parshas aser to aser, kischalel aser, that when you give a tithe, and if you when you finish tithing, giving old tzedakah, Seine Madgish that emphasized with the Nechosim von Ayiden that the assets of Yid seien bei ihm geapikoden von dem Ebersten. They are just a sort of a deposit from Hashem. Und der Odom is nicht kebalabais. The person is not really in charge. Das drückt sich aus in them, and that expresses in the fact was a chelik von seinen Nechosim. Part of his asset, muss avegem zu a zweiten Linie, must give it to another Yid. Matne Sanim, the gifts for the poor, und Afroshes Trumas und Meisters, separate Trumas und Meisters. But Dugma zu pay the Shviz, welcher sein Hefke Lakoil, the third aspect, similar to the fruits of Shviz, which are Hefke for everybody. Und der Fahr is man der noch Messiah mit der Kriya from Parshas HaMelech, and that's why you conclude with reading the portion of the king. Und euch die Kriya von alle Parshas Hanal is durch Melech, and also the above is the king. So the king is involved in all this. Well, the Emes HaKoreh, because the true recognition with their Odom v'chol Hashaloi, that the person, everything that belongs to him, that everything that is his, and the ganze Bria and the entire creation, seine nit kein Metzias for sich, they're not an independent entity, but alles gehört zum Edem Ebersten, everything belongs to Hashem. Wird aufgetan durch den Melech, that is accomplished through the king. Warum Tavkido Ikri from Melech is because the main function of the king is to mamshich sein to extend to un in and in dem Inyan from Kabbalah's oil Malchus Shemayim and Yiras Hashem, accepting the yoke of the heavenly kingdom and the fear Hashem. Bis zum Hergish from Emerson Bittel till the sense of the true Bittel. Was gibt nit kein Ort for a Metzias, which does not allow for any entity chutz von Ebersten outside of Hashem. With the Tzemach Tzedek is das Mevayer Baruch has explained at length from the Tzemach Tzedek, that is the idea of the king to bring about the true self-negation. The king brings it to the people. And that's the key of all of the above mentioned details, to realize that everything is Hashem, and that's why the person does what he's supposed to do in all the different aspects. The Hakore is based. Das ist the Bir Pnimis. The Bir Pnimi also explains in the inner matter was the din von Adayin Shviz Nahegeba, that still Shviz applies in the 8th day in Shana Shmiz. In the 8th year is Dafki in them Kotzir Shel Shviz, Hayetz Lamatzoi Shviz. It's specifically in the law that what was cut on the 7th year from the grain that came out from after Shviz. The Hakora was nemt arois from Shviz as Oretz. This recognition that we take from the fact that the land rests, as the Eibishter is Balabayis of Eretz v'chukei HaTeva, that Hashem is in charge over the land and the laws of nature, Isai vi das is Shona Hashmiz, is also in both, as it is in the 8th year. Because you're still eating, when the Chayes Ha'oichel is, where does the vitality of the person eating is from their Tvua, was his Gezeit geworden b'Shona Hashishis, he's still taking from the grain that was sown in the 6th year, with the Pasuk Zok to Zeraitem, as Shona Hashminis, that you will sow the 8th year, v'achaltem min hatvua yoshon ad Shona Shviz, that you will sow the 8th year, and then you will eat from the old grain from the 6th year until the 9th year. Menzet inir begolui birchas Hashem. You see openly the blessing of Hashem. Loit teva haaretz kenzi nitzayin b'shon hashminis. In the 8th year, there couldn't that be. Kedei. So why is that? Amazol oich habun in der shon hashminis gufa. That within the 8th year itself, the hakora, the recognition as that odom v'chol asher loi, that the person, everything that is his, gehert zum Eibishten, belongs to Hashem. Is do der zweiter inyan. Oh, so that's the first thing. But in order that you should also have that the person, everything that belongs to him is also, the second is in Shona Hashmiz. As Adayin Shviz Naheges Bo Bekotzir Shel Shviz, Hayotze lemoitze shviz, that in the grain, what you're cutting of shviz that goes most to shviz, as oich in the shona hashminis is that odom nitkim balabais of them kotzin. That also in the 8th year he's not in charge, but he's from Zayin Soda, is his field. Ubemele is a margish umatki is a margish umakir because gehert the Eibush. Then he recognizes that everything belongs to Eibush. Ubemele shas there's man when es fehlt sich. Man when es fehlt sich an ein von Teuchen in Shmita. It's a time that you feel similar to the idea of Shemitah. You have grain, you're not using it. Hein in dem was mezet as euch dan speis der Eibush dimension in both aspects. You see that Hashem is feeding you then. You're eating the broche on the 7th year, on the 8th year. And you're not allowed to use the 7th year. Hein in dem was der Mensch fühlt, as is nita mitzis, he feels he's not an entity for sich, weil in sein eigene Sode is ihm nicht der Leb geworden zu fühlen sich bei Balabais, even in his own field. He's not permitted to act as one in charge. Is demol de pasik Zeit, so then it's the fitting time, as the kriyas aparshiyas from Hakel Durcho Melech, that when the portions of Hakel are read by the kings, they should have an inner impact if divided the Keshe Shonim on the following 6 year. These to the extent as Velomdu Liyiras Hashem Alekecha Kol Hayomim, they will learn to fear God, your God, all the days, Asheratem Chayim Olo Hadomo, that you live on the earth. This is Mesiches Shabbos Parshas Netzobim Vayelech Tovshin Lamed Beis V'Tovshin Mem, and Simchas Beis HaShe'evo in Tovshin Yud Gimel.